Hello everyone. In this particular tutorial, we are going to discuss about conditional statements in Python. Before that, let me give you a quick context. So when we execute a program, generally the instructions are executed line by line, but sometimes we might want to change the way the instructions are executed. Sometimes we might want to execute a set of instructions only if certain condition is true, or else we want to skip it. And second situation is sometimes we want to execute a piece of code multiple times. In programming, we call this as control flow because we're basically changing the way the instructions are executed. And we can achieve control flow by using two main concepts. First one is conditional statements and the second one is using loops. In this particular tutorial, we're going to discuss about conditional statements. And these conditional statements are also simply called if statements because they start with a keyword if. So first of all, let's see why we need to use conditional statements. They are used to implement decision making in programs. What do we mean by decision making? Let's take a real-time example. Let's say I want to play a sport, but based on weather conditions, I want to decide which sport I want to play. So if it is sunny, then I'll play cricket in the ground. Else, if it rains, I'll play badminton indoors. So this is how we generally use decision making in real life, right? So even in programs, we can implement similar logic using conditional statements. First, let's see how we can write a simple if statement. This is the syntax. We write if and then we write the Boolean condition. So how do we create a Boolean condition? By using different comparison operators and logical operators. We have discussed about them in the previous tutorials, right? So Boolean conditions or expressions are nothing but expressions which evaluate to true or false, right? And after the condition, we put a colon symbol, which is this double dots. And under this if condition, we'll be writing whatever statements we want to execute. Now all these statements together can be called one code block. And because this is under if condition, we can simply call this as one if block. So this whole thing can be simply called one if block. Now this if block will be executed only if this condition is true, or else it will not execute it. And one very important thing we need to understand is in Python, indentation is used to represent a code block. If you are coming from other programming languages like C, C++ or Java, we generally use these kind of curly brackets to represent a code block. But in Python, we use indentation to represent a code block. And the standard followed for indentation is using 4 spaces, which means when we write these statements, which are part of if block, we have to keep 4 spaces at the start of these statements. As you can see, all these statements will be starting at this point after 4 spaces. So in that way, Python will be able to identify this whole thing as one code block under if condition. Now let's see a small code example. So I have opened my PyCharm. So let me create a folder, or you can say directory, with a name control flow. All right. So conditional statements are also part of control flow, right? So let me create this folder. Now let's create a Python file. So we can go to this folder, right click and then select new, and here we can select Python file. And here let's create a Python file with the name conditional statements, all right, and press enter. So our Python file is created. Now let's take one of the examples which we already discussed. Let's say there is a scenario where we want to check if a particular person is eligible to vote or not. So let's create 2 variables. One is age and assign value, let's say 25. And next one, let's say country of residence. We can simply use a name, variable name country, and let's say India. Now we want to check if the person is eligible to vote or not. Let's assume the eligibility criteria is the age of the person should be at least 18 years and country of residence should be India. So what we can do is we can write an if statement here by writing if, and then here we are going to write a Boolean condition, which is age greater than or equal to 18, all right, and We have two conditions, so we will be using AND to connect those two conditions. So the second condition is country equal to India. So let me just simply put a space here so that it looks better. All right. So here we have written this condition. Now we have to end it with a colon and press enter. Now if you see here, as soon as you press enter, PyCharm creates the indentation of 4 spaces for you. Because whenever we want to write some code inside the if block, we have to put the indentation. Here let's simply print a message saying person is eligible to vote. All right. Now if you want to write more code inside this if block, we can simply press enter, and here we can write some other statements as well. Let's say for example we want to print age as well. So we'll put age is and then comma, and let's also print this variable age. So this way we can write as many statements we want in this if block. And it need not be just print messages. We can write any logic we want. If we want, we can even create a variable like a is equal to 10. All right, we can write whatever code we want inside this if block. So let me remove this. Now let's say for some reason, like when you press backspace or when you press delete, the cursor automatically moves to the start of the line. Now if you want to write the code inside this if block, we have to keep this indentation. But instead of putting 4 spaces like this, what you can simply do is simply use your tab key. Then automatically it creates the indentation of 4 spaces. And the reason why tab key creates the indentation of 4 spaces is, in general, most of the IDEs are configured in such a way that when you press enter, automatically 4 spaces are created. And we can verify that configuration in PyCharm as well. If we go to the settings of PyCharm, let's go to the settings, and here, let's expand this editor, right? And here you can find this code style. So if you expand this, you will find an option called Python. So as you can see here, both tab size and indentation is given as 4, which means automatically 4 spaces are created when you are writing an indented block or when you press tab key. All right, this is why when you press tab, automatically that indentation can be created. If at all you have something other than 4 and 4 here, make it 4 and you can just simply click apply here. All right, I'll just click OK now. Now we have completed writing the if statement where we are verifying if a person is eligible to vote or not. Now let's say after this if statement, which means after this verification is completed, we just want to print a message saying verification is completed. So how can we do that? If you press enter, automatically the cursor goes here in this indentation. But if you write something here, it will be part of this if block. So if you want to come out of that block, what you have to do is we have to press backspace or delete. All right. Now let's just give a space so that code looks more readable. So in the next line, let's simply print verification is completed. Done. Now what happens when we execute this program? So age is 25, country is India. Now it comes and checks this condition. So both are satisfied, right? Both are true. So this will evaluate to true. As the condition is true, it will execute this block of code. So it should print person is eligible to vote and age is 25. And once the execution of this if statement is over, then it will continue the execution of the rest of the program. So it will come here and it will print verification is completed. So let's run this program. Right click, run conditional statements. Now you see person is eligible to vote is printed, age is 25, and it also printed verification is completed. Now let's say instead of 25, age is some 10, let's say 10. Now what happens? This condition will be failed because age is not greater than or equal to 18. So it will not execute this if block and it will just go out of this if statement and continues the rest of the program. So it will simply print verification is completed. Let's run this and see again. Right click, run, and you can see verification is completed is printed. As you can see, it did not execute this block. So it just simply prints verification is completed. Now here in this logic, we are only specifying what to do when the condition is true. But in most of the scenarios, what happens is we want to also specify what we want to do if the condition is false. To do that, we should be adding an else block to the if statement. This is how we create the else block. After the if block is completed, we'll put else and put a colon, and under that we'll be writing whatever code we want to execute if the condition is false. So this if block will be executed when the condition is true, else block will be executed when the condition is false. And also this else block is not mandatory to have. As we have seen in the previous example, we did not write the else block, right? But still code works fine. Whether you require an else block or not, it depends upon your problem statement. Now let's write the else block. Now if you go to the end of this line and press enter, it will start at this indentation, right? But if we write something here, it will be part of the if block. So what we should do is we should go back to the start of the line and then we should write else block. So we'll write else and colon and press enter. Now again here, when you want to write code under this else block, you have to put an indentation. As you can see, when you pressed enter, automatically PyCharm has created this indentation for us. So here let's simply print person is not eligible to vote. All right. Now this whole thing is considered as one if statement, inside which we have if block and else block with multiple small statements. Now what happens when we execute this program? Value of age is 10. So this condition will be false. So it will execute the else block, right? It will print person is not eligible to vote. And once this if statement is completed, it will continue the execution of rest of the program. So it will print verification is completed here. So let's run the program and see. Right click, run. And as you can see, person is not eligible to vote and verification is completed. Till now, we have seen how we can write if statements based on a single condition. If the condition is true, you're executing the if block. If not, we are executing the else block. But let's imagine this scenario in real life. Let's say you want to go to a movie. So you will first check if the tickets are available. If they are available, you will buy the ticket and go for a movie. But if not, what we generally do is we check the tickets for another alternative movie, right? Then if that ticket is available, you will buy and watch the movie. If not, we might want to check if tickets are available for another alternative movie, isn't it? So we can basically implement this kind of logic in Python programs as well, using something called if-elif-else blocks. Let's see how we can write if statements with if-elif-else blocks. So this is the syntax. So we already know how to write if statements, right? We will put if and then write a condition. And under this condition, we'll write the code block we want to execute if this condition is true, right? If not, if this condition is false, we want to check another condition, let's say condition 2, right? And based on that, we want to execute the code block under this condition 2. So we can write this second condition using something called elif. Elif is a short form of else if. So what we are basically doing is we are checking condition 1 else, which means if this condition is false, then we are checking another condition called condition 2. That's why we call this as else if, right? Else if condition 2 is true, then we are going to execute this code block. If this condition is also false, let's say condition 2 is also false, then we will check another condition, let's say condition 3. In that way, we can write multiple conditions using if-elif blocks. So what is happening here? Basically, Python checks conditions sequentially from top to bottom and executes the code block under the first true condition and skips the rest. So it first checks condition 1, and if it is true, it will execute the code block 1 and goes out of if statement. If not, only if this condition is false, then it goes to the next condition. And if this condition is true, it will execute the code block under it and it will go out of if statement. If not, then it will go to the next condition, right? In that way, it checks these conditions sequentially from top to bottom. And when it sees the first true condition in this top to bottom order, it will execute the code block and skips the rest, which means it will go out of the if statement. Now, just like in normal if-else statements, here also we can put an else block and this will be executed when all the conditions are false. When let's say all these k conditions are false, then it will execute the code block under else block. A very popular example for if statements with if-elif-else blocks is finding student grade based on marks. So this is a general scenario we find in university exams, right? So let's say a student has written an exam and he scored some marks. Now based on marks, we want to identify the grade of the student. So here are the conditions given. If the marks are greater than or equal to 80, student is given A grade. Else if marks are greater than or equal to 60 but less than 80, the grade is B. Else if marks are greater than or equal to 40 and less than 60, the grade is C. And finally, if marks are less than 40, the student has failed the exam, and so you will give F grade. Now let's see how to implement this logic in a Python program. So let's write the logic here. So I have just put a print message, a descriptive message, just for the sake of analyzing the output easily. All right, now let's create a variable called marks that captures, the score of the student. So let's say marks are 65 for now. Now let's see how to implement this logic using if-elif-else statements. So first we have to check if marks are greater than or equal to 80, then we can give A grade. So first let's write this condition. If marks greater than or equal to 80, let's simply print A grade. All right. Now let's say this condition is false, which means let's say marks are less than 80. Then how should we give the grade? As we can see here, then we will check if marks are in between range of 60 and 80. In fact, it should be 60 less than or equal to marks less than 80. Now, in order to check this condition, what we can do is we can write an elif block. So if you press enter, it will start at this point, right, at this indentation. But we want to go out of if block. So you press backspace, then you will go to the start of the line. So here we'll write elif, right? And here we have to put the condition. Now, how can we check if particular variable is in between some range? Now, generally in most of the other programming languages, this is how we write the condition to check if a particular variable value is in between some range. We write it like marks greater than or equal to 60 and marks less than 80. But we can write these kind of comparisons much more easily in Python by using chained comparisons. In fact, if you see here, there is a yellow underline, right? If you just hover over it, it will show this kind of a suggestion, saying that we can simplify this using chained comparison. And if you click this blue link kind of a thing, it will automatically convert that particular syntax to a chained comparison. So don't always rely on PyCharm. We already know how to write this, right? So we can write 60 less than or equal to marks less than 80. All right. So this will be our next condition, which we write in elif. Now, if it is true, then the grade will be B. So we'll simply print B grade. All right. Now, if even this one is not satisfied, then we'll check for this condition, right? 40 less than or equal to marks less than 60. So let's write another elif block, elif, and the condition will be 40 less than or equal to marks less than 60. All right. Now the grade will be C, right? So let's print C grade. Now, if even this is false, which means marks are less than 40, then the grade is F. Now, do we need to write this condition of marks less than 40? Like if you say in this problem statement, we have this condition specifically that if marks less than 40, then the grade is F. But do we need to write this condition? We don't need to write, because if all these conditions are false, then obviously the marks are less than 40. So without writing the condition, we can simply put an else block. So here we can write else, and here we can print F grade. All right. Now let's see what happens when we execute this code. So here marks is 65. So first it checks this condition. So this will be false, right? Because marks are only 65. So this will be false. Then it will go to the next condition. Here it is true, right? Marks is 65, so this condition will be true. So it will simply print B grade. All right, let's run and see. Right click, run conditional statements. You can see it prints B grade. Also, one thing is you can see putting these kind of descriptive messages, they help us separate the outputs so that we can analyze the outputs easily. All right. So consider putting these kind of output messages, when you are printing a lot of things. All right, now let's take another condition. Let's say 50. Now what happens? So this condition will be false. All right, then it goes here. Even this will be false because 50 is not in range of 60 and 80. Next, it goes to the next condition. So this will be true, right? 40 less than or equal to 50 less than 60. So this will be true. So it will simply print C grade. Let's run this program, right click, run. We can see C grade is printed. Now let's also finally see, 30. All right, now what happens? First it will check this, it will be false. So it goes to the next condition. This will also be false. Then it goes here, even this will be false, right? So all the conditions are false. So it will execute the else block. So it will print F grade. Let's run the program and see. Right click, run, and you can see it prints F grade. All right. Now we can optimize this code a little. Let's see how we can do it. But before that, let me simply copy the same thing and let me put it here. And let me simply make this as version 1. All right. Now here, let me put this as version 2. All right. So let's go here and see what modifications we can make. Now if we analyze this code, so what is happening here? First we are checking if marks greater than or equal to 80, right? So if this is true, we are simply printing A grade. If not, we are going and checking here. So when Python goes to this condition, isn't it obvious that marks are less than 80? Because if marks would have been greater than or equal to 80, this condition would have been true and this would have been executed. Isn't it? So that's why here we need not check that marks are less than 80 because when it comes here, it means obviously marks are less than 80, right? So we can simply only check if marks are greater than or equal to 60. So we can remove this second condition less than 80. Now in this condition, we are only checking if marks are greater than or equal to 60. Even if syntactically we read this as 60 less than or equal to marks, this is equivalent to saying marks greater than or equal to 60, right? But for the sake of readability, let's make it marks greater than or equal to 60. All right. So this is much more easier to follow. So now if marks are greater than or equal to 60, this B grade will be printed. If not, only then it will go to the next condition, which means it will go here only if marks are less than 60. So even here, we need not check if marks are less than 60, right? So we can remove this and we can make this as simply marks greater than or equal to 40. All right. So as you can see here in version 1, we are making two comparison, to check one condition, but here we are only making one comparison. So you can say this version 2 is much more optimized. Now let's run this code with a few examples, to check if the code is working correctly or not. So here we have marks 30, right? So it should print F grade. So let's run this program. And you can see in both the versions, it prints F grade. All right. Now let's say marks are, let's say 70, right? Let's change this in both the versions, 70 and 70. Now if you do right click, run, you can see it is correctly printed as B grade. Now just like the previous if statements we have written with if-else blocks, even in this case, when you have if-elif-else blocks, this whole thing is considered as one if statement, inside which we have multiple small statements, right? Inside one if statement, we have multiple blocks of if, elif, and else, under which we write different statements, all right? So this whole thing is considered one big compound if statement. Now one thing we have to be careful about while writing if-elif-else blocks is that the ordering of if-elif blocks will be important when we have overlapping conditions. Let's try to understand this. So let's say in these two versions of this student's grade example, here let me remove this particular block, which is based on 40 less than or equal to marks less than 60. Let me remove it and place it above this particular block. All right. In the same way, let's also do the same thing in version 2. Let me remove this particular block where we are checking marks greater than or equal to 40, and let's put it above marks greater than or equal to 60 block. All right. So now let's see what happens. In both the cases, we have marks as 70. So as per the problem statement, what do we want the output to be? It should be B grade, right? Because if marks are 70, then this condition is satisfied. Now let's see what is happening. Let's run this program. So you can see that in version 1, we got the correct answer B grade, but in version 2, we got a wrong answer, which is C grade. Let's see why there is this discrepancy. Basically, if you observe in version 1, so all these conditions are non-overlapping because we have written both lower boundary and upper boundary in each conditional check, because of which for a particular value of marks, it will only match one particular condition. Now, if the value of marks is 70, we can see that it will only match this particular condition, which is 60 less than or equal to marks less than 80. It will not match this. It will also not match this. Similarly, if you take value as some 45, we can observe that it will not satisfy this condition. It will also not satisfy this condition. Only this condition will be true, isn't it? So for any particular value of marks, only one of these conditions will be true. But let's see what is happening in version 2. Here the conditions are overlapping because let's say if marks are 90, so this condition will be true, right? But if marks are greater than or equal to 80, it obviously also means marks are greater than or equal to 60 and marks are greater than or equal to 40, isn't it? Similarly, if marks are greater than or equal to 60, as in this case, it also means marks are obviously greater than or equal to 40, isn't it? So here these conditions are overlapping. For one particular value of marks, it can match more than one condition. That's why we call these conditions as overlapping conditions. So here when you change the order, what is happening here is, so we have marks as 70. So first condition it will check and this will be false. But if you see the next condition, instead of marks greater than or equal to 60, which is this one, we are checking marks greater than or equal to 40, right? Even though marks are greater than or equal to 60 in this case, and it should be B grade, marks greater than or equal to 40 will also be true, isn't it? That's why it simply prints C grade and goes out of the if statement. So when you have overlapping conditions, the order in which we write these conditions and blocks will matter. So let's put it back in order. So I'll remove this, all right, and put it here. Now if you see, by maintaining this order, we are making sure first we are checking if marks are greater than or equal to 80. If not, first we are checking if marks are greater than or equal to 60, right? Then only if this is false, then only we are going and checking marks greater than or equal to 40. And this will avoid any sort of errors. Now if you run, we can see that we get the correct answer in version 2 as well. All right. So always keep in mind, when you have overlapping conditions, order should be important. Now in version 1, we know that these conditions are non-overlapping, so order would not matter, but still it is highly recommended to write these blocks in proper order, right? So this way, whenever someone reads your code, it is much easier to understand the logic, isn't it? First we are checking marks greater than or equal to 80. Then we are checking, if marks are between range 60 and 80. Then you are checking 40 and 60 range, right? So this way code looks much more readable and easy to understand. So I hope that now you understood how to write if statements with if-elif-else blocks. In the next video, let's discuss about another variation of conditional statements called nested conditional statements. And then we will also discuss about a special operator called ternary conditional operator. I'll see you in the next video.